Hey guys, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Witch on the Holy Night. So last time it was a pretty normal day for Sojuro, right? And hopefully that normal days continues. So let us continue and let's see what happens today. Misaki High was a private school and as such its winter break started earlier than public schools. The end of term ceremony was in mid-December, followed by a brief respite before the next term began. Of course, that was if and only if they overcame the classic obstacle lying between them and an extended break from school, the final exams. The radio continued its broadcast late into the night. A thermos of hot tea eliminated the need to venture down to the kitchen. An electric blanket kept away the winter cold and a crab-shaped pastry staved off any dinner-time hunger. These were the lengths Aoko had gone to. She needed to ensure that every aspect of her surroundings helped her pull a successful all-nighter. Look at Aoko's room. What is that on the bottom left? What is that, slippers? Oh, she got different kind of slippers? Okay.
期末試験1日目ご苦労様。それで生まれ変わる覚悟はできた？
Wait, is she talking to Sojuro? Okay. Sojuro nodded earnestly. Upon returning from work, he encountered not the maid she expected but the demon student council president Aozaki. Half a day earlier, the first day of exams were over and Sojuro was about to head back to the mansion where he hoped to put his plan into practice when...
今夜、私の部屋で監禁ね。あ、夕方からのアルバイトは当然キャンセル。ちょっと本気であの点数はありえないから。
A cold blue grin greeted him in the hallway. Clenched in her fist was Sojuro's exam paper. Mr. Yamashiro had no doubt said...
転校してきたばかりだし、しょうがないよね。
What, so Mr. Yamashiro is gonna give him a second chance? He's gonna let him retake the test? But she had snatched the exam out of the teacher's hands the minute he tried to show her. That was how Sojuro had ended up in Aoko's room instead of the room in the attic to which he was accustomed. Though her situation was far from normal, at the end of the day she was an adolescent girl like any other. Naturally, she felt uncomfortable letting a boy her own age into her room. However, his grades were truly something that called for desperate measures. That explained why her mood was even worse than normal today and the vein on her forehead was pulsing visibly with anger.
先に自分の復習済ませる。
Oh, the music changed.
あんたはそのテーブル使ってて。
Aoko turned her back to him and sat down at her favorite desk. Sojuro was left standing before a cheap-looking glass table.
なんかいろいろと慣れないな。なあ、青崎、この青いのなんだ？
Blue thing. Restless, Sojuro found his eyes drawn to the guitar propped up in the corner. Oh, he's talking about the guitar.
なんか薄いし青いしとんがってるし、きっと青崎のことだし。
So Aoko has an amplifier there as well. Imagine how angry Alice is whenever Aoko plays this.
もしかしなくても武器か。
But yeah, Sojuro doesn't know because yes, he is from the mountains. He probably hasn't seen a guitar, or maybe he's seen a guitar, but not like this guitar. An electric guitar.
楽器よそれ。エレキはともかく、アコギは音楽室で似たようなのあったでしょ？あとこれ以上青々言ったら、そのとんがってるので殴るからね。
That in other games, in like MMOs that I play, they sometimes use guitars as weapons. Yes. Sojuro plopped himself down onto a cushion, struggling to suppress the desire to retort that it was a weapon after all.
ちょっとは落ち着きなさいよ。いつもは耳の遠い大型犬みたいに鈍感なくせに。何？
In fact, it was Aoko who was oblivious for once. For his part, Sojuro could not figure out why he felt so restless either. Suffice it to say, they were both pretty clueless in this moment.
もしかして内装？この部屋の家具のグレードが今とは違うから不思議がってるのね。ここベッド以外は私の家から持ち込んだものなの。引っ越してから2年経つけどまだ屋敷には馴染んでないでしょ。
Though she misunderstood the real reason for Sojiro's nervousness, Aoko seemed satisfied that she had resolved Sojiro's anxiety for the time being and returned to her studies. She flipped through her notes and textbooks as if fast-forwarding a tape. There was no opening for an outsider like him to intrude in her high-speed study sessions. Repelled by her intensity, he retreated to his table. He was at least sensitive enough to pick up on her desire to be left alone. It was a testament to Sojiro that having his needs utterly ignored was now second nature to him, to the extent that he could now happily go about his business in solitude. Two hours has passed. Then as the clock neared 11, Aoko's speed and concentration began to slip. She's sleepy now. Seeing his window of opportunity, Sojiro seized the moment to strike up a conversation.
青崎、ちょっといいかな。
何？
She spoke hesitantly, not bothering to turn to face him. She continued to flip the pages of her textbook, albeit at a slower speed than before.
この3日間、青崎たちの夕食事情を見てきたけど、君たちの食事はいつもああなのか？
そうだけどおかしい？
But honestly, I wish though Alice would open up. Yeah. Like we would have like conversations like this. Like the one, yes, Aoko and Sojiro is having, but with Alice instead. Because yeah, Alice is pretty much like always serious.
そう言われると困るな。ただ学校じゃみんな楽しそうだった。誰かと食事をとるってことはああいう風になることだって思ってた。だからもしかすると。
もしかしないわよ。別にあんたのせいでアリスと話さないわけじゃないわ。私たちはいつもああだから。
We've never talked to each other during meals. Aoko spoke calmly with her back still turned, seemingly unaware of what he was getting at.
張り詰めた食卓だな。青崎とアリスは仲がいいと思ってたのに。
She neither confirmed nor denied his statement. She was, however, surprised by the disappointed tone in which he had made it.
張り詰めた食卓っていうのは合ってるわね。アリスが何回あんたの飲み物にメスカリンを入れてたかなんてもう覚えてないし、昨日なんか堂々とサラダの中に7かまどなんか混ざってるし。
Miska what?
ほんと、あの子何考えてるんだろう。
A bitter smile spread across her face in reminiscence. The pages of her textbook continued to turn.
メスカリン？
Oh, what's that?
サボテンから取れるアルカロイドよ。アリスが使う以上、ただの幻覚剤じゃないでしょうけどね。と、
Also,
私はこんなもんでいっか。
Alice was putting that in Sojiro's drink. Come on. With that, she slammed shut her fourth textbook of the night. After having scarcely changed position the whole night, she finally turned in her chair to face him.
さあ、今度はあんたを仕込まなくちゃね。今日の4科目の答案、実に宗十郎らしい出来栄えでそっとしそうになったわ、私。
Her tone was light, but her gaze was heavy as she stared at Sojiro, seated cross-legged on the floor.
原告、地理、数学、電子工学。あの調子であと2日続けたら冬休みが消えるのは当然でしょうね。そうなると困るのは私なのよ、実際。
いや俺も困るぞ。休みなのに学校に行くのはなんか気が乗らない。
Sojiro calmly corrected her.
そりゃあ私のセリフだ。あんたが学校に行くってことは必然こっちまでとばっちりが来るっての。
All she could think about, as much as she tried not to, was Mr. Yamashiro and his annoying grin.
それ以前に私の目が黒いうちはオール赤なんてやつは許さない。本来なら少年から叩き直すところだけど、 あんたはいろいろ事情があるから、とりあえず点数だけで勘弁してあげる。私もテストは一夜漬けで片付ける方だから、あんた一人仕込むのにそう時間はかからないだろうし。
Sojiro's expression openly sourced in response to her declaration. It was obvious that he did not think he needed her meddling in his studies.
あんたね、苦労するのは私とあなた、どっちだと思う
Sojiro got the feeling that it would be him, but he nodded slowly nonetheless. Then again, it would probably take more effort on her part than on his, and in any case, he knew there was no way to talk her out of it.
この度はご迷惑をおかけします。
Sojiro summarily bowed his head to show gratitude and willingness to work.
よろしい。安心なさい。私だって鬼じゃないから。
I'm not a demon.
別に平均点狙うってわけでもなし。予定通りこなしていけば3時には眠れるわよ。
You'll probably be able to get to bed by 3. She nodded with satisfaction, pleased by his studious attitude. He had plenty of obstacles ahead of him, but that sense of humility might be enough to see him through.
って何仏心出してるんだ私。いいしずきくん。この後頼られちゃたまんないから釘刺しておくけど、私がマンツーマンで誰かを仕込むなんてことめったにないから。これはあくまで異例中の異例だって覚えておいてね。
She spoke more to convince herself than him, but his expression still darkened. It made one to hang aside around his neck that read, "Please take me home," like an abandoned pet. Aoko chided herself for being so soft. For some reason, in that moment, she recalled that it had been raining the day after they met each other. Time passed like the falling grains of an hourglass. And it's morning. Did they even sleep?
結局。
Look at her eye. Look at her eyes, she's so tired. Aoko squinted as light poured through the window and she downed another cup of tea. She had lost count of exactly how many she had drank long ago.
一晩かかったね、大崎。
Sojiro picked up on what she left unspoken. Aoko had used all of her pep. I'm in staying up all night, but also in shouting at him. He looked pale and uncomfortable, just as he had all night long.
ええ、甘く見てたわ、あんたのことを。
だから褒めても何も出ないって。
ある意味褒めるに値するかもね。
She was at the end of her rope, but she could not help the bit of pride that swelled up in her. His lack of even the most basic comprehension was shocking, even taking into account his upbringing in the wilderness. His ability was that of a middle school student, and that was being generous. Preparing him for exams by teaching him new concepts and ideas was a waste of time. Rote memorization was his only hope for passing. What is rote memorization? Everything he memorized could collapse like a house of cards afterwards for all she cared, so long as he remembered for his exams. Assuming that he had the capacity to be a good student in the first place had been her mistake. It took all night to cover the content for just 4 exams, and she still did not feel confident he could apply what he so earnestly tried to memorize.
でもね、真面目なのはいいことだけど、あんた暗記するのに時間かかりすぎ。
そこは多めに見てほしい。今まで頭より体で覚えることのが多かったんだ。
Aoko let out an exasperated sigh. Naturally, physical prowess mattered more in the mountain life than the intellectual kind, but still.
まあいいわ。これで山城からあんたの成績について相談されることもないでしょうし。紅茶もう一杯入れてくれる？
Sojiro stood up and obeyed as Aoko stretched her aching back. She had apparently bought the tea bags in bulk, so there was still plenty to use.
まったく 無駄遣いだな、青崎。
He spoke under his breath so she wouldn't hear. It made him somehow happy to see her so tired and unfocused after the grueling all-night lesson she had given him. It did not cross his mind that the excess tea bags, far from being an indulgent purchase, were purchased intentionally to sustain them through the night. A relaxed expression came across Aoko's face as she watched him, naive and peaceful as he could be.
悪くないけど、せめてリーフティーで入れられるように仕込まなくちゃダメかな。
Seeming to have overheard her not so inner monologue, Sojiro made to face her.
やっぱり味は違うのか？
違う、もう全然。ま、正直私はどうでもいいんだけど、アリスはね、かなりお茶にはうるさいよ。そうだ、宗十郎、アリスとうまくいってる？
Aoko cheerfully slumped over the table, now covered with textbooks, and the scribble notes. Sojiro watched her with a hint of resentment in his eyes.
彼女と会えるのは食事の時だけで、食事と言ったらあれだろ？どうやって仲良くなれって言うんだ？
そう？私は十分脈ありだと思ったけど。そっちはアリスを怖がってないし、アリスはそっちを追い出す理由を見つけようと躍起になってるし。いい条件よ、これって。
全然わからないな。あの子とこっちの関係は遊園地前の青崎と俺の関係と同じじゃないか。一体どこがいい条件なんだ？
とりあえず反目し合ってはいないでしょ。一方通行の関係だけど、それはそれ。アリスにしちゃ上出来っていうか、理由を探している時点で可能性ありってね。あの子は反感に応えることが癖になっちゃってるから、大抵相手を自滅させちゃうのよ。
Okay. No, I was thinking like, would Alice really kill Sojiro though? I mean, I think she wants him to be kicked out, but like straight up killing him? I think if she wanted to, she would have done it already. Yeah. No, like if she couldn't control herself is what I'm saying. Like she just wanted to kill him off, right? I mean, maybe she wanted to do it. Maybe she wants to still, but yes, with the deal with Aoko, right? But yeah, I mean, we heard also earlier that she was putting hallucinogenic stuff on Sojiro's drinks. Oh my god, her ominous words only confused Sojiro further.
知ってしまえば単純な話なんだけどね、あの子の場合。ただ、
whether or not he could put it into practice was another story altogether.
難しいよ、青崎は。
He carried their teacups back to the table as he spoke. Aoko picked hers up and took a sip as if to dispel her exhaustion.
でも、確かに君の言う通りだ。俺はまだあの子の顔しか知らない。クオンジ・アリスという名前すら定かじゃないのは問題があるね。
He followed Aoko's lead and took a sip of his own. His cup contained not tea but plain hot water.
あの子のこと教えてほしい？
Aoko scrutinized him carefully as she sat. Most boys would have been captivated by her gaze in that moment.
いや、そういうことは本人に聞いてあげるべきだと思う。
But he ignored her and stared straight ahead as if speaking directly to Alice herself.
そうね。ほんと、あんたってアリス好みの対応をするわ。ねえ、前から気になってたけど、客室でアリスに何を言ったの？いくら私との約束とはいえ、あの子が部外者を半日も放置するなんてありえないのよ。
He thought back to that moment. He could recall only 2 or 3 words he had exchanged with Alice after awakening in the guest room. He did not recall the conversation being anything special, but he could not bring himself to casually share it with Aoko now. After all...
ねえ、どんなセリフであの子の気を変えたの？
Aoko eagerly pressed him for answers. Soldier frowned, unsure what to say. He did not know what the interaction had been like for Alice, but for him it had felt special, sacred almost. The question was why and for whom was he so concerned?
ほら、白状しなさいってば。隠し事なんて似合わないわよ。
Her discerning smile moved even closer. Or disconcerting, sorry. Soldier did not look like he was able to stay silent much longer. As he would eventually come to realize, Aoko Aozaki had a sometimes troubling propensity to gossip.
まあ、あの子と何を話したかは言わないけど、今の青崎に比べれば花もロマンもなかったのだけは確かかな。さっきまでは青崎が鬼みたいだったからいいもんだなって気がつかなかった。
He stared directly into her eyes as he spoke. Aoko nearly leapt out of her seat in panic. Now that he pointed it out, she realized their bodies were practically touching.
仕方ないでしょ。この方が効率良かったんだから。
Come on.
あんた、横にいないとすぐ間違えるし。
Aoko stood up as she lashed back at him.
そうだね。なんか昔みたいで久しぶりに集中できた。これが異例中の異例っていうのが本当に残念だ。
This was just an exception among exceptions.
余裕あるじゃない。その分じゃ今日のテストだけじゃなく、アリスとの話し合いもうまくいきそうね、宗十郎。
あ、それはもちろん。
His cool response caught her off guard, and for a moment she was at a loss for words. She meant it sarcastically, and yet he responded with a warm smile.
方針変更だ。まずは近くで話しかけてみるよ。嫌なことはいずれ終わるって分かったから。
Engage her directly. Aoko remained in a state of shock as he spoke and rose to his feet. She could not help but feel a reluctant respect for what seemed to be this newfound confidence and competence.
とりあえず今日は一人で帰ってアリスと話してみる。青崎は放課後生徒会だろ。
That is way too dangerous, man. This is gonna be funny what happens though. He was right. It was their last meeting before winter break. Normally, he would have waited until the meeting ended or else gone straight to his part-time job. This was part of Aoko's plan to make sure he and Alice were never alone in the mansion together.
待った。まさかあんた、一人でアリスとやり合うつもりなの？
Is this a good idea?
別にやり合うつもりはないぞ。し合っても勝てないだろう、アリスには。
You make it sound like we're gonna get into a fight. Brother, maybe. His reply made complete sense, which fooled or floored her.
でも青崎がいたら話が複雑になるのは目に見えてるんだ。そんなわけで今日はゆっくり飛び丸の相手でもしててくれ。
本気？
He felt like he was being tested but nodded nonchalantly nonetheless. Knowing how grave the situation really was, Aoko was not sure how to respond to his apparent lack of concern. The morning light coming through the window marked a stark contrast between the two, which stood bathed in light, which lurked in a darkness that went without saying. The silence lasted for only a brief moment. Staring at him gravely, she said,
そう。なら止めはしないわ。
That was all she said. Her dry tone hid the significance of their pregnant silence. Pregnant silence? Not revealing the slightest sign of discord.
なんか怒ってないか、青崎。
別に。それで何か考えはあるの？下手な考えは通じないわよ、あの子には。
Soldier furrowed his brow in deep thought. He knew it would be hard to get close to her through talk alone. In fact, it felt nearly impossible.
言葉で落ちないやつは物で釣れ。
Kinomi had been the voice of wisdom and folly for him countless times in the past. Incidentally, Kinomi had been referring to Aoko at the time he shared that pearl of wisdom. But Sojiro had had the distinct impression that trying to buy Aozaki's kindness with gifts would not end well.
だいたいアリスの趣味もわからないじゃないか。考えてみると今の自分と彼女はまるで接点がない。
Sojiro crossed his arms at a loss.
いつものことだけど何も考えてなかったわけね。
うん。でもまああれこれ考えなくてもいいと思う。アリスにはあれこれ説明するとか分かってもらおうとかそういうんじゃなくてなんていうか。
He pondered intently as he tried to put his vague thoughts into something concrete, but he did not spend much time in thought. With a nod, he concluded,
要は俺が彼女を好きかどうかってことじゃないか。
He articulated that which is often so hard to say with surprising clarity and calm. It was certainly a prerequisite for the task he had hoped to achieve. He had no hope of making her appreciate him with words, or with acts of giving the expectation of reciprocation. He simply wished to get to know her better because he liked her. That was his honest, uncontrived intention, and it reflected the purity of his heart. But whether that was in his best interest or not was another story altogether. Calculation and compromise, selfishness and conflict. Purity, such as his often irritated people who believed that morals went against human nature, or rather, people who were inevitably forced to believe it. Aoko suddenly walked away without responding to what Sojiro said. Her long hair swung from side to side as she passed him.
Ozaki?
Noting her strangely cold manner, he called out to her. However, she was already opening the door to leave.
下でシャワー浴びてくるから、あなたは自分の部屋に戻ってて。
Her words lacked any expressive inflection. In his confusion, all Sojiro could do was nod.
いいけど、やっぱり怒ってないか、青崎。
Emotion returned to her face as he spoke. Yes, it was not the typical irritated look to which he had grown so accustomed.
そうね。あんた流に言えば、多分私は怒ってる。何に対してのものかは、あんまり言いたくないけど。
Poor Sojiro did not even realize that he himself was the reason. She looked at him, and for an instant he witnessed an emotion on her face, of which he had never seen the likes before.
じゃあね。これが最後になるかもしれないから、お別れぐらいは言っておくわ。あなたはアリスを甘く見すぎてる。でも、それが同時にあんたの強みなのよね。私たちには毒にしかならないけれど。
The door slammed loudly shut behind her. Her steps were audible as she walked away on the other side of the wall. The corridor must have been nearly freezing without any central heating, but Ako seemed perfectly comfortable.
なんで私から出ていくんだ
Hey, this is her room.
順番が逆普通先に出てくのはそっちじゃない
That's why I was like, okay, you're leaving Sojiro in your room? I mean, obviously he's not gonna do anything here anyways, but yeah, you're leaving first? Aoko promptly kicked Sojiro out of her room. Once again, the wooden door closed with a slam. The corridor was not as cold as he had expected. Not quite as bad as a freezer, at least. Okay, exam time. The second day of exams had ended, and Sojiro was on his way back to the mansion. The road grew steeper and steeper, and the woods thicker as he made his way up to the familiar slope Do you miss having exams in school? Me personally, I mean, not really, but yeah. It's just that you remember it, like, oh yeah, we used to do that back then, and it was okay, I guess, right? People in town called it not a hill but a mountain simply because it took over 20 minutes to climb. This did not sit well with Sojiro, for whom a mountain was something that could not be overcome so easily. The road was paved, for one thing, and the canopy overhead let in plenty sunlight to guide the way. None of the inclines were especially steep and no animals lurked in the underbrush. There was no chance of losing his way and no reason to worry about getting lost.
情けない。まだ未練ばっかりだ。
Sojiro quietly reprimanded himself for getting so wrapped up in his own little world. In the past few weeks since moving here, he had been constantly comparing the town with his former mountain home. Normally, he would not get upset over it, but in recent days since meeting Aoko as it happened, he had become rather hung up on the differences. He was none the wiser as to why, but he knew that Aoko was a force that could not be stopped. This naturally made him want to quicken his own pace. The mansion where they both live were the antipathy over lively personality. It stood out like a sore thumb even in a town like Mizaki. Some people said it was haunted. There were no ghosts per se, but it was inhabited by magicians, so their claims were closer to the truth than they could have possibly known.
そういえば、幽霊と魔法使いっていうのはどっちが常識外れなんだろう。
I mean, ghost? Lost in contemplation as he was, the boy failed to notice how his own lack of familiarity with a city life played into the equation. In any case, none of his pondering changed what he needed to be done. Tomorrow was the last day of exams. That meant he only had a little longer until Aoko stopped taking responsibility for his safety. If possible, today was going to be the day when the mansion's owner accepted his continued residence there. Sojiro slipped between the trees encircling the mansion and walked down a natural tree-lined avenue that led him to the front door.
よし。
I wonder what's gonna happen. Taking a deep breath, he stepped across the threshold. And the drawing room was where he expected to find Alice. However, he found himself face to face with the most unexpected scene. A few steps in, he arrived at the large foyer extending from the mansion's entrance. But one thing was clearly out of place. The foyer of the mansion was like a hall in the medieval castle. It was illuminated by the cold winter casting down through the skylight and aided by artificial light. The wooden tiles smelled of the outdoors. Oh, where's the Aoko? And there was Alice dressed all in black, huddled against a column so enormous it resembled a sharply cornered tree trunk. The mansion was quite literally supporting her frail body. Was she sleeping there, like a mother's lullaby or gently rocking cradle? The heavy atmosphere within this old building suppressed even the slightest stir, almost as if warding away any disturbance to her slumber. Why is she there, by the way? There she slept in the shadows of home, hidden away from the outsiders. Her sleeping figure was enough to mesmerize anyone who laid eyes upon her. Sojiro instinctively looked up at the ceiling out of sheer awkwardness. He wanted to surprise her, but not in this way. Her slender frame lay asleep by the fireplace. The scene was as beautiful as a painting, yet hard on his heart at the same time. Her slumber seemed breathless. She was too still, with not even a hint of movement. And yet, slumped against a frigid column under the cold winter sky, happiness appeared to be her blanket. A passerby would not be blamed for thinking she was in that most peaceful state of eternal slumber, death. Sojiro spoke to himself as he gazed idly upon her. Bringing her a blanket or something warm did so much as cross the boy's mind. Instead, odd as it sounds, the first thing he thought to do was to go prepare some tea. He made sure to be as quiet as possible as he opened the drawing room door. On the table waiting for him were 3 pills. They were the medicine Aoko required to take every day when he arrived home. Gulping down the vaguely sweet pills and continuing onto the kitchen, he selected a box of tea from among the many in the cabinet and brewed enough for 2 people. Alice was still asleep when he returned to the foyer. Careful not to make any noise, he crouched close to the ground. He startled by how cold the floor felt through his pants. He thought it would be warmer here by the fireplace, but then again he recalled how Aoko had referred to it as a useless hole in the wall. What was likely the case was that neither she nor Alice knew how to use it properly. He got some cookies as well. After taking the teacups from the tray and placing one in front of each of them, Sojiro carefully pulled his textbook on classical literature from his satchel.
青崎、怒ってたからな。
He could still see her angry face from this morning. The reason for her anger was still as much as a mystery as the unusual look he saw briefly come across her face. In any case, one thing was certain: he needed to start studying for tomorrow. Thanks to Ako's instructions, today's exams went well enough, but tomorrow's would be even more formidable challenge. After how angry she was this morning, he couldn't expect her to help him again tonight.
そのくせ点数悪いと怒るし、別に青崎が怒る筋合いじゃないと思う。
He complained under his breath as he cracked open his textbook. Apparently he intended to spend his time in this fashion until Alice finally awoke. The sound of the pages turning was the only audible noise in the grand hall. There was no ticking of clocks or rustling of leaves to disturb her sleep. After a few hours, Sojiro quietly rose to his feet. The light that filled the foyer was beginning to turn from white to red.
そろそろバイトの時間か。
He glanced again at Alice as he stretched his stiff back. She slept in a perfect stillness, just as she had this entire time. Sojiro arched his brow in speculation. He had no idea what her normal sleeping schedule was like, so he had no idea as to whether he should wake her.
いや、青崎も帰ってくるだろうし、いらぬ世話かな。
As if reaching the end of the long train of thought, Sojiro gave a quick nod of his head and took his leave of the mansion. Today, work was a shift at the Chinese restaurant in Misaki's shopping district, the Mad Bear. Okay, we're going to work. Their uniforms had been made by someone with an obvious preference for garish colors. The orange apron was emblazoned with a cartoonish polar bear slashing a walk in two with its powerful claws. The design resembled the warning signs about wild animals seen in the mountains and stood out in Misaki for its one-of-a-kind originality. This was the Chinese restaurant, the Mad Bear. Aside from its name and logo, the restaurant was a type of cheap, hole-in-the-wall dive that could be found anywhere. It faced competition from the ever-increasing number of chain restaurants, though it had managed to last longer than other dining spots, having received rave reviews on a regular basis. The Mad Bear prioritized the personal touch of focusing on its local clientele and thus made a point to offer home delivery. It had earned the affectionate moniker QKS, the Quick Killer Shop. Making these deliveries was Sojiro's responsibility for the time being. Placed in Misaki within striking distance fell under his domain. Anything beyond that was handled by a more experienced staff member on the legendary 50cc King Salmon motorbike, but anyway.
ヤシロギのダチから聞いたんだけどな。
When delivery workers were not out on deliveries, they spent their shift buzzing tables or washing dishes. The dinner was rush was yet to come, and Sojiro and his fellow delivery boys were shooting the breeze while washing the dishes in the back.
聞いてるか、しずき。
聞いてるよ、木の実。
Honestly, we haven't really like hung out with Kinomi for like a long hangout. For example, an hour or like say 40 minutes of a scene with him. Like fully, like we have shorter scenes, just very short scenes for him for now. The two were elbow deep in a giant sink as they enthusiastically scrub at least. That was they pretended to do while they gossip.
和食のケニアだけじゃねえんだってよ。三崎町の大帝都にもメシアンにもその手の注文があったらしいぜ。そんなに肉が欲しいなら下市に行けばいいのにな。なんだって生肉だの大物の鮭丸ごとだのを出前させやがるのか。どうよ、こう露骨にヤバそうな話じゃね？ワニとかアザラシでも飼ってるんじゃねえかな、そいつ。
他に比べてみると確かに珍しい話だと思う。ところで木の実、ワニってなんだ？
ワニはワニだろう。だっせ、実物見たことないのかよ。まあ俺もねえけどな。今度ガクガク動物ランドのアフリカ特集ビデオを貸してやるから見とけよ。
This was a familiar pattern of conversation between the two, especially now Kinomi was used to Sojiro's lack of general knowledge. Their banter was interrupted by the delivery phone. The manager snapped up the receiver and quickly jotted down the order and address. Once he hung up, everyone in the kitchen did their best to avoid making eye contact with him. Nobody wanted to go rushing out for delivery on such a cold day.
しずきくん、ちょっと遠いけど配達をお願い。
The manager singled Soldier out for the task, seemingly unfazed by his staff's laziness.
はい、これ届けるもののリスト。異例だからあまり他のバイトには他言しないようにね。
The manager tore the sheet with the order and the address written on it from his memo pad. Soldier took one look at it before a grimace quietly spread across his face.
マネージャー？
なんだい？
The manager stared right back at him as if he could tell what it was he wanted to
君
say.
の疑問はもっともだ。しかしまあ、長いことこの商売をやっていると、時にはこんなバカな話が転がってくることもある。そうおかしなことじゃない。じゃあ、冷蔵庫から品物持ってくるから。
Soldier stared in admiration as the manager, dressed in black, marched out of the kitchen in his all-business way. Nowhere was free from the odd occurrence now and then. The bright lights. We're
Osai!
back. Okay, we're back. We're back home. Alright, so let's take a break here. But yeah, pretty, what do you call this? Chill. Yeah, still a lot of chill moments. I thought that we were going to talk with Alice this time around, but I guess not yet. Maybe a little bit more, and then maybe we can have a conversation with Alice, right? Like, why was she sleeping in the foyer there when we entered the house? So I guess we'll see what happens next time. So we are gonna continue this and do more of Witch on the Holy Night in the next one. So I'll just see you then, guys. Bye bye.